when they start thinking about it and making decisions themselves, the chances are we're going to take more responsibility of that if things don't quite go right. But hey, boss, if you've told me what to do and it doesn't go right, guess where I'm coming? I'm coming straight back to you.
Hello, and thank you for joining us on the Sound Leadership Podcast, the podcast designed for L&D, HR professionals and leaders. Each episode unpacks essential topics to help you solve workplace challenges, create a strong leadership and coaching culture, and gives our practical leadership sound bites. I'm Dan Boniface, your host. Stay tuned, and we hope you enjoy this episode. With me today are learning and development professionals Laura Bridgeman and Darren Draper. Hello. Welcome to the show.
Hi.
Today we're unpacking the topic of creating a coaching culture, and this is a phrase that we're hearing a lot of the time. And we've worked across all sorts of industries, from global energy companies to local authorities, to help them implement a coaching culture. So it's fair to say we've done this a lot, and we should have a lot of information for our listeners on this. So look, let's start by unpacking coaching culture. The first question I think to explore is, what is coaching culture?
Yeah, so this is something we hear a lot at the moment. Organisations looking to embed this coaching culture. It's almost become a bit of a buzzword, but without necessarily the definition behind it. And this might vary by organisation, but I'll give it a go. So largely the coaching culture is around shifting out of that transactional style of leadership and into a more transformational style of leadership. So transactional, very kind of, do as I say, quite autocratic. It's quite stifling for people, and it can create this constant firefighting and kind of micromanaging environment, which is not particularly helpful or motivating really for employees or leaders. A coaching culture is more about being transformational. So actually looking at what can each individual bring to the organisation? How can we empower them to take things forward, to generate their own options? And this works really well for both leaders and the teams in being able to really shape, what does this look like for us? Let's get out of this kind of small picture, day-to-day running of management that we would normally see, and move into, okay, where can we actually move this organisation forward to? So it's much more inspiring.
So is coaching about micromanagement?
No, coaching getting away from micromanagement, definitely. So in having those conversations between the coach and the coachee, you're getting them to generate, what do they want their role to look like? What do they want their productivity to be like? What are their aspirations? And then through very gentle questioning and guidance from the coach, they then are able to generate their own options to take that forward, and then close the session by actually talking about, well, what will you do? What will you, the coachee, do, take forward? When might that be by? You can ask them kind of what support might they need. But I find in coaching, personally, I do a lot of mental rehearsal with my coachee, so that by the time they finish that session, it's not about me telling them what they need to go and do, but actually they've got it completely planned out in their head, how they're going to do it, what it's going to look like, what it's going to feel like, and how are they going to achieve it.
By the way, that's really difficult to do, isn't it? In terms of it was one of my struggles when I first became a coach, and learning that actually it's about extracting the information from our clients rather than giving the information. And often when our clients are talking, we think we know the answer, but we might not. And I think that shift, and for me, I did a lot of work with some it was a global firm, and we had the HR team, all the HR partners in the room. And actually that was a real mindset change for them to shift from that advice giving into asking questions mindset. So there's lots of challenges around that, but there's things that we can do to develop those skills. Darren, Laura mentioned there about this transactional versus transformational approach within business. Just give us a bit more insight into what that means, and then how does that fit in with a coaching culture?
Yeah, again, I think it's that change of focus. So first question a business needs to ask is, why do we want a coaching culture? Is it just so I can stick it on my values that we have a coaching culture? Because it's the employees in the business feeling that there's a live coaching culture that says the business has it. And I think that's the really important aspect of it, is because when we have a coaching culture and people start to feel it, we get these role models at all levels of the business, asking the right questions, moving away from that command and control. And when others can see those role models, feel the benefits and start to live and breathe it, that's when that culture gets delivered. That's when the full benefits come along. So again, it's that focus of why do we want the coaching culture? Because it's a better way of doing business. We believe in the people that work for us, that they have the knowledge and expertise, and we need to create that space for them to feel heard, because when people feel heard, they feel valued.
So important now, isn't it? Things have shifted from that almost, dare I say, old school management style where it is very autocratic to what can you offer me as an employee coming into your business? What are you going to give me? And I always kind of make the joke that, having a laptop and a phone, that's not a benefit. I can't do my job without those pieces of technology. So what are you offering me as an employer when I come work for your business? How are you going to help me develop my skills? How am I going to get better? Which ultimately helps the organisation grow anyway. Is this a shift that we're experiencing through business?
Yes, definitely. So CIPD reported last year that there was a big shift in kind of HR spending away from that reward and recognition piece, which is very transactional, and more towards learning and development and coaching as part of that. So exactly as you say, clients that I coach, for example, when they're looking for new roles, for progression, is that it isn't so much around the package anymore. Actually, they want to be part of a collaborative team, for example. They want to have a supportive manager. They want to have leaders that they aspire to. And actually, I think what's coming through is that there isn't an amount of money in bonus terms or whatever it might be that counteracts that, that kind of compensates for it. People are looking to invest their time and their energy in a workplace and in their role, and therefore feel that that's reciprocated, that the organisation is also investing in them.
I think what's really, really interesting, picking up on something you said there, is that where's the coaching happening? So is this an employed coach external to the business, or are we coaching to create this culture? Are we coaching within the business? But then who is doing that? And for me, the beauty of coaching versus other approaches is that if we've got skilled coaches in the business, so I'm thinking about L&D professionals building teams, trying to meet targets, this kind of stuff. If we can get coaches into the business, or develop our leaders to be great coaches, actually the benefits are huge, and not just for the employer, but employees. The leaders enjoy coaching. Coaching's really good fun once we get our head around the getting away from the advice giving bit. So what's the impact then? What are some of the benefits of having this coaches embedded around the business?
I think it's also about questioning. We have embedded coaches, but the culture part comes in. Everyone talks that same language. So actually, coaching can happen behind a closed door, one-on-one. But more importantly, coaching can happen at the start of the day when we're having our team meeting, that instead of a command and control, I'm going to tell you what you need to do, I'm going to ask some questions. Because actually, what's really important is it's the responsibility side. And we see that if it's a one-to-one or in the group sessions, because if as a leader or a manager, I'm asking the team, what are we looking to achieve today? What are the jobs we need to get ticked off? How are we prioritising that? They're thinking about that. And when they start thinking about that and making decisions themselves, the chances are we're going to take more responsibility of that if things don't quite go right. But hey, boss, if you've told me what to do and it doesn't go right, guess where I'm coming? I'm coming straight back to you. And so I think where some businesses view this coaching culture as I need a big coaching bank so everyone can have some one-on-one coaching. No, this is about the language that we use to start empowering our workforce to take full responsibility of the job that they have.
Totally agree with that. And we've done webinars on time management, and we look at middle and senior managers in particular. And they're so time poor because they're doing other people's jobs and their own job. And actually, if we use coaching, and you're right, the language we use, the terminology, the way that we ask questions to push that back to others, we're developing, or we're giving accountability, ownership, responsibility over the tasks that they're delivering. And actually we're also getting time back for ourselves as a leader and a manager. I always put this in a way that, if my kids like playing with their train and track, the easiest thing for me when they get stuck, when they can't put the pieces together, is just as a parent to stand up and go and do it for them. But actually they learn nothing at all. And next time they'll come back and they'll ask me. Whereas actually I want them to develop independence, learning, thinking skills, decision-making, problem-solving, all of those aspects. And by coaching it back to them, have you tried it this way round? What about if you did it the other way round? What about if you tried that other piece of kit that goes in there? And actually then they can take responsibility and therefore more enjoyment. So is it fair to say that if we create a coaching culture, and we've seen it in some of the businesses we worked with, that there's more job satisfaction in the business?
Yeah, 100%. We often have it reported back that once, coaching is really getting going with those really clear objectives at the beginning, they start to gain some momentum, is that staff do feel more empowered, more valued, job satisfaction, because of the level of autonomy kind of increasing. They feel like they're now masters of their own role rather than, passive and being told what to do. So yes, and that has a massive ripple effect. So we see it kind of at personal level with kind of professional relationships become more effective, more productive. Negotiation and communication is much better. We see employees taking responsibility for their personal goals, for their individual goals, and therefore for the organisational goals. And then, where people are feeling valued, they develop a loyalty to the organisation. That then ripples out into retention, better brand reputation. So yes, it has really far-reaching kind of impact in terms of an organisation.
Darren, come on, you love a ripple effect, don't you? What are we talking about with that?
Well, for me, this isn't just at-work skill. So this is an at-home skill. This is a conversational skill that we have. You were talking about with kids, and we can use that coaching culture. But if you're starting to empower people at work with the questions you use, or empower people at home with the questions they use, they have more chance to reach their potential. And when they start to see the effects on themselves, their language may adapt. And that then starts to flow through, because, the aim of any work or at home is actually that happiness point, that I feel I am a valued individual. And then by feeling valued, either I'm going to stay with the business, that's the overall aim, but at most I'm going to stay as a customer for the business. And I think that's really key as well, that we have to look at everyone that works for the business, even if they were to leave, that we keep them as a customer and that they're positive about the business. When they see it on someone's CV, I see that you work there. How was it? Oh, it's great. It allowed me to be the best that I can be. And I think as a business at times we have to appreciate that people will leave us, but we've done our job as a leader by helping them on the journey that they can be the best that they can be, and hopefully they'll go to another business and empower others to be the best that they can be.
There's human need to know that we're cared for and that we have this sense of belonging, and I think coaching really helps with that. The other thing you mentioned there about coaching with kids, I agree. It does work, although I do get told not at bath time. that is the time to be transactional and get the kids into bed.
That is a tell not ask situation.
I often get told by my wife, stop coaching the kids at bath time. So there we go. Laura, so we've spoken about the word coaching a lot, and for me there's common misconceptions that we hear a lot of the time between coaching and mentoring. So just define the two for us.
Yeah, so mentoring is probably more well known, and people often mistake mentoring for coaching. So with mentoring, there is a dynamic at play in terms of the status of the mentor and the mentee. So the mentor typically being more experienced, more senior in their role, and the mentee looking to learn something from them. So there's a lot of telling, a lot of sharing of experience, which is great in some instances and exactly what people need if they have a particular aspiration. But coaching is the other side of that. So we use the 80-20 rule. So for coaching, it's 80% coachy. So it's about them talking things through, generating their own options, coming up with their own ideas, and then coming up with their game plan going forward. The 20% of the coach is predominantly around questions, a little bit of guidance, kind of expanding their thinking, maybe testing a perspective with a particularly well-crafted question. So they are quite different. And often where people associate mentoring with aspiration and kind of progression, coaching has kind of had this almost a stigma around it as something that you do or you have that is done to you when you're not doing so well. And actually we're seeing that change. So some of the organisations that we're working with, particularly in like the NHS and some universities that we work with, is that there's that shift away from mentorship and just telling someone what they could do and hoping for the best and hoping that they take that forward and find their own way, to actually coaching as a really positive learning and development approach and approach in the workplace generally. So actually coming away from that, I'm being coached because I'm not really good or I'm not great at it. Actually, we're coaching you because there's huge potential here for you. And actually it is a privilege and an investment on behalf of the organisation to be coached.
Yeah, totally agree. I love the empowerment side of it when you see someone that you're working with so much potential and use that coaching approach and you just see them grow and you don't always get the returns in the moment. We live in a really fast-paced world now, but you don't always get that return right now. It might be 6 months, a year, 2 years down the line. And I had someone recently that contacted me and we were just chatting about, I brought her on as an apprentice. It's about 15 years ago. And she just sent me a nice message saying, I wouldn't be where I was today without your coaching. And, that's unbelievable. And that's not to make that story about me, but it's the impact of the coaching that you don't see it in that moment. And actually, she's not someone that I speak with regularly. I've kind of followed her career, but she's gone off and done her own thing. But if I've contributed to that a little bit, then, that's a great position to be in. It makes me feel good. But actually for her, that supported her development.
If we think about the people that we do aspire to and those type of people that we might reach out to ourselves with those types of messages, they are people that made us feel heard, that changed our perspective, that helped us work through these things. That's what coaches do. You don't have to sit with a coaching badge on and that label necessarily, but just using those approaches. And it does have a really profound effect on people and a lasting effect, actually.
I just love the fact that it's about the answers in you. And I'm very privileged to get to work with, and I've been reflecting on this recently, I get to work with a lot of experts. And sometimes we brush over that. And we think we know best, when actually, let's ask those experts. So that's where the coaching approach comes in. Let's find out about, what do they know? What can they bring to the table? And there's so much we can learn from others as well. So using that coaching approach allows us to extract that information and develop ourselves, our teams, our business. Come on then, Laura. So you've worked with lots of big companies in the last year or so. Give us a bit of insight into some of the things that you've done to help implement the coaching culture.
It's really kind of across the board, from logistics and distribution companies to massive public sector organisations, the NHS and such. They will often kind of approach us wanting to embed that coaching culture and start with kind of developing that bank of coaches so that they can go out into the business and kind of role model it a little bit. And sometimes that can mean having expert coaches come in first to role model it, or can be through kind of training or just assigning it, really shining a spotlight on someone who is very good at it naturally in the organisation and kind of building it from there. It's really important to have senior management buy-in. It can be one of those things with coaching that it appears, at least in the short term, to be quite qualitative. It's intangible, it's difficult to measure. But like all things that you're measuring in terms of people, whether that's staff satisfaction, well-being, etc., it can take a little while, but the benefits are definitely there. So with that initial investment, whether that's role modelling with external coaches or training and qualifications, then they start to see that impact coming through, and people picking up those behaviours from their coaches and then rolling that down to their teams, for example. It's important to have an infrastructure in place, not just kind of talk about coaching as though, you know, while the approaches can kind of, you know, ripple out into everything. Coaching sessions themselves need a little bit more structure. That when you're building a relationship between coach and coachee, that shouldn't be corridor chats or, you know, car park catch-ups. Actually keeping, I think of it as almost like that sacred space for coaching, really allowing that relationship to develop for people ultimately to make themselves vulnerable in addressing what it is that they want, putting themselves out there and being a little bit bold, being a little bit brave, trying something new. And then we do see that return on investment come through. You know, for us as a training organisation, it's more cohorts come through. They train more people, you know, because they want to roll this out to the whole organisation, not just one level, because they start to see the impact. And that is things like staff retention improving, staff well-being improving, progression, accountability, whether that's the number of mistakes being made at kind of an operational level. It really does have a really far-reaching impact. But yeah, buy-in from those senior leaders, really important, particularly if you've got senior leaders who are already role modelling those behaviours. That's fantastic to have. Train up the ones that maybe do need to switch more out of that mentoring approach and into that coaching approach. That can be really helpful. We often see people using coaching as part of performance management, as part of one-to-ones. So again, moving away from that, here's your target, this is where you are on it, work harder. You know, that very kind of tail and transactional approach is actually turn those into opportunities for coaching. What do they want to achieve? Is there a better way of doing it? You know, have they noticed something and how can they take that forward themselves? So really empowering.
Yeah, we see a lot of the L&D leads, HR professionals that we work with, the guys organising the training will often have done a coaching course first, or they will do it with the team as well, so that then they're modelling those behaviours. And I think that's essential to get senior leaders buying into it. Darren, you're from a retail background, and just give us a bit of insight there. Where do they sit as an industry? Are they ahead of the curve? Are they behind it in terms of coaching culture?
I think it's really interesting because retail is quite famously time poor. And I think the tendency is when we're time poor is to go into that command and control style of management, that we need to get A, B, C, D done. So I'm going to tell people to do it. And I think one of the hard things around implementing a coaching culture is actually it takes longer to hit the position that you want than if I was just telling you to do it. Actually, I can tell you now what to do, when to do it and how to do it, and it would be done to my standard of good. We're actually a coaching culture of, okay, let's talk me through what your plan for the day is. What's your next? How have you prioritised? When we start asking those questions, actually the curve won't be as steep, but the potential then to get higher up is more. So I think retail is a really good example of just watch out, because when the pressure's on and we haven't got as much time, we naturally revert back to type. Yeah. And type for most people is that command and control and then not that coaching side. So I think retail's intentions are good, but sometimes the pressures push them in another direction.
Yeah, if I was coaching in that industry, and I often hear that we don't have time to coach in the first instance, because you're right, because you don't get a result in that moment. It does take a little bit longer, but you haven't got time not to do that, because the return on investment in terms of time pays you back tenfold a month, 2 months down the line. And actually then those moments where we do get into pressure situations, we've empowered our teams to make sound decisions off their own back, and they don't need to keep coming to us as a manager and leader. Then we can go and be effective in other areas of the business or with other people. So for me, it is about investing that time up front, and it pays back further down the line.
And I think it goes into that point. A manager and a leader isn't there to achieve results. They are there to create the space so others can achieve results.
Yeah.
And it's a small shift in the mindset, but it's a powerful shift in the mindset.
Absolutely agree with that. Guys, what strategies have we got then? So how do we implement a coaching culture? What are some of the things that we need to be doing?
There's kind of two sides to it, as there are with most things in organisational change. There's the process and kind of the infrastructure, and there's having the people. So, you know, coaching culture, to create it, to embed it, to make it sustainable, it does need to balance both the process and the people. So just having coaches on the ground, so to speak, is not going to create a coaching culture for you.
Be good fun though.
It would be good fun, almost coaching by stealth. But actually having an infrastructure in place, and this is something that we spoke about with one of our clients in distribution, is actually almost matching coaches and coachees. So looking at, rather than it being, you know, you have someone who's very naturally a coach, for example, rather than having them kind of swamped with people wanting coaching, and having some who might be just more introverted, you know, might just have a slightly more introverted style and be overlooked. Actually look at how can you match coach and coachee. So how can you, rather than just say, okay, everyone's going to have a coach and you've got so and so and so and so, actually the dynamics are so important. So helping coaches to create a coaching profile, for example, so that people are able to match their coach's values with their own. It's part of creating that psychological safety.
So we recommend, and we practice as coaches, a chemistry session prior to any coaching taking place. So just give us a bit of insight into what.
Yeah, so often that's something that people feel, oh, but I already know my coach/coachee that I don't need to do that. But actually chemistry is so important in an organisational context, because it is taking on a coachee is a very different role for a coach from line managing them or maybe working across in a different team. So actually having that, what we call a chemistry session, it's almost like a first date. Yeah. So you get the coach and the coachee together. We keep it very low stakes. Talk through what are the needs, what are the objectives of the coachee, and then for the coach to think about, am I in a good place to facilitate this for this person? Are the dynamics good here? Are we aligned in our thinking and our values? You don't always have to be kind of carbon copies of one another. Sometimes you can kind of stretch each other's perspectives, which is good. But ultimately, coaching is about the relationship. So having that early session, very low stakes. If it's not a good fit, it isn't, and that's fine. But actually having that good starting point. And if chemistry goes well, you know, like a first date, you start laying the groundwork for that further relationship, setting expectations and such, how things are going to work. But yeah, those early sessions, and even what we would call contracting, just as important in an internal scenario as it is having an external coach in, because those sessions need to hold that space. As I said earlier, there needs to be a set of expectations, also professional boundaries. That's even more important in an internal context. When is this person my coach and when are they my line manager, for example, or something else? Confidentiality being really important, you know, even more so for building trust in an internal context. So yeah, that early kind of laying the groundwork, rather than, hey, I think I can help you, let's jump into some coaching. You know, take the time, kind of work through it in quite a systematic way, and then once those foundations are set, the relationship will blossom and you'll see the progress out of your coachee.
I always get asked about, so what happens if you do a chemistry session, it doesn't go well, you don't connect? I'm like, don't worry about it. Yeah, don't take it personally, it's fine, because we don't get on with everyone in life. And actually the premise behind coaching is that it's about the other people, it's about the client. So therefore, if it's not a good match, we'll find another coach in the business, because we've created this culture where they're there, or, you know, it might be an external coach. But The reality is, I don't think I've ever had a chemistry session where someone's turned around and gone, Dan, I'm not working with you. So it's just an opportunity to make sure we do fit and we're aligned in our thought process and how we're going to deliver the coaching.
But sometimes it comes down to the expectations of coaching as well. We spoke about how coaching and mentoring are very different. If someone is approaching that chemistry session and they are looking for you to provide them the answers and step in as that mentor, that's the opportunity to make that really clear. You know, I've had private clients who have come to coaching with a set of expectations but have actually needed something more like counselling or therapy. So that chemistry session is a really good opportunity to set those boundaries. This is who I am as your coach, this is what I can offer. And it might be that actually maybe they need HR support, or they need, you know, from an employee assistance program or something like that. It might not be coaching that they need. So it isn't always just on the personal dynamics, but actually, what does coaching mean for this person? And is coaching the right fit, or is it something else?
Just a little tip on that know your role as a coach. You know, if someone does come to you and it is counselling or therapy that they need, let's signpost them to the right place. Let's not be someone that we're not, or, you know, do the things that we're not qualified to do. Let's get the right help in place for that person. Darren, something we talk about is psychological safety. So what do we mean by that?
I think it's about creating that co-responsibility for what we're going to move into. So if we're in an official coaching session, so a one-on-one, actually we are signing up to the agreement of what can be shared, how can things be shared. It's an open space, all of those things. So both parties are signing up to that responsibility, that we can have open, honest conversations around things. Now, actually, when we're coaching on a day-to-day basis and we're creating that culture on a day-to-day basis, that's sometimes harder to do. So that means that it's the team that's got to sign up to that culture. And especially if we're moving into a coaching culture where feedback's being given, then it's moving into that space where feedback is given for you to be the best that you can be. Because sometimes we use feedback as I'm going to tell you where you're not good enough. And we go, well, we don't want feedback because we don't want to be told how we're not good enough. If it's given in a positive way and received in a positive way, then I think that's really good. And I think it goes back to, and I was just reflecting on what Laura was saying, I've had loads of training for leadership, management, coaching, culture, all of this. But the one thing I've never had training on by any business that I've worked for is to how to listen. And I think that's sometimes the skill that us as managers and that sometimes lack, is that ability to listen. It's that ability to go, wow, look at the talent I've got on my team. I am going to sit back and listen, because the best decision makers, so when we start talking about the Steve Jobs of this world, you know, I read something that someone said, Steve Jobs always gets it right. And I'm like, what, Steve Jobs is always right? And they're like, no, you've misheard me. He always gets it right.
Yeah.
Because he listens to the people around him, brings all that data and information together, and then makes a decision based on that. And that's the huge difference between a coaching culture and just your command and control.
Top skills of anyone coaching: be curious, ask great questions, and most importantly, practice your listening skills, and really tune into that. Great stuff, guys. That's really good. Laura, give us the top 3 leadership sound bites that we can take away.
Well, the first thing is that we associate coaching with stronger leadership. When you've got strong, capable leadership, you have a happy and stronger workforce. So coming back to that ripple effect, really, an investment in coaching is an investment in your people, in your leadership, and ultimately in your organisation's success. The next one we'd say kind of link into that, so empowering others. So that's shifting from telling to asking, from that transactional to that transformational leadership. That creates better retention rates and also succession planning. You may have employees under your nose with these aspirations who just need the little bit of encouragement, just that little, someone to listen almost, and for them to feel bold in pushing themselves forward. And lastly, it creates that sustainable high performance. So to link back to Darren's point there, where coaching and feedback might be closely linked. Really creating that culture where it is about continuous improvement. It is about everyone being accountable and everyone playing their small part in moving forward. And that means then that actually that takes some pressure off of your leaders, that they're not having to do so much, whether it's micromanagement or, you know, that kind of very operational side of their job, is that they're empowering and delegating to others. As a result, they're happier and their teams are happier.
That's all for today's episode of the Sound Leadership Podcast. We hope you found it interesting and valuable, and it's given you some great ideas on how to create a coaching culture. We'd love to hear your feedback, read your comments, or if you have any questions or topics that you want us to discuss and cover, then please do get in contact. And you can do that in the comments section or by emailing us at hello@thebcfgroup.co.uk. And don't forget to subscribe and keep an eye out for the next episode. Thank you very much for joining us on the Sound Leadership Podcast, and we'll see you next time. The Sound Leadership Podcast was produced by Media First. To learn more about the media crisis and communications training, visit mediafirst.co.uk. The editor and producer was Darren Wingham. The show was hosted, written and researched by me, Dan Boniface. A special thanks to all the team at Media First and the BCF Group for supporting the development of this podcast. To learn more about the management, leadership, training and coaching that the BCF Group offer, visit thebcfgroup.co.uk or get in touch by emailing hello@thebcfgroup.co.uk. Finally, a special thanks to our exceptional guest today, who you can contact via the BCF Group.